सारे सास listeners know. Namaste, Sasrikal, Salam Alaikum. Good evening. This is your host, Paul.
And this is your host, Karen. We both welcome you to Garam Chai with Karan and Paul. ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਮੰਗਦੇ ਆ, you can, or you can speak in English. Both languages are most welcomed here.
Since we live in a multicultural nation, it's only fair that we have a bilingual debate show. So without any further ado, let's get this Garam debate underway.
Wow. We have a very exciting show for you tonight.
I can't wait.
Yes, well, we're going to be debating prenuptial agreements. Well, Paul, why don't you tell our listeners what prenuptial agreement is?
Karen, the legal definition of prenuptial agreement is an agreement made by couple before they marry concerning the ownership of their respective assets should the marriage fall.
It kind of sounds scary, doesn't it? It's almost like you're setting yourself up for failure for marriage.
I know. Why do you get married?
Oh, I don't know. Well, prenup agreements are becoming more and more viable in the South Asian community. You know, when you're young and you're madly in love, it's so much more easier to sign that document because you don't see past it. And then as time clicks on and it goes by, you start seeing, you start getting ups and downs in your marriage. And, you're seeing wealth being built up. And then all of a sudden, when you're on that downer, you'll start questioning it. Like, did I just sign all my rights away? Did I sign my financial rights away?
Well, it's true. It has to do with financial security. But some would argue this is even more important if there are children involved from that marriage. Mm-hmm. Deciding to sign or not, this may be the most important question one may ask. Some would argue that such a contract is a romance kill and question the concept of loyalty and trust, while others would say it's to instill peace of mind from within and have personal security.
Well, do you know, prenuptial agreement is such a difficult topic to bring up. Like, when do you bring it up with your partner? Is it a topic that's going to be easily discussed among couples? Or is it a topic that's going to just break up a relationship, leading them to go their own separate ways before marriage even takes place? Is there a right time to bring this up?
Better yet, when should this be brought up? Once again, you're listening to Garam Chai with Karan and Paul, the only debate show within the South Asian community where we bring controversial topics to our platform and, unlike others, ask tough questions.
As we stated in the beginning, we have a fabulous debate set for this evening. I would like to welcome individuals debating in favor of prenup. They are Harminder and Gurpreet, both from Surrey, BC.
It gives me a great pleasure to introduce those debating against prenuptial agreements. They are Simmer Paul from Victoria, BC, and Wendy from Richmond, BC.
Ladies and gentlemen,
boys and girls of all ages,
with a cup of Garam Chai,
let's enjoy a Garam debate.
Harminder, let's start with you. As we were talking earlier, you said you are for prenuptial agreements prior to getting married, that one should sign it. Now, where did that idea come from? Why are you for it? Let's hear about it.
I've heard of many people getting burned.
Okay.
For having a prenuptial. The divorce rate is through the roof. I understand that nobody goes into a marriage expecting divorce or, preceding that. But there's so many. And people do get burned. And it's unfair that somebody has built an empire and that someone can come into your life and walk away with that.
Harminder, when you got married the first time, did you actually have a prenuptial agreement?
No, I was 18, didn't have anything. We both started up together. We both built our empire. When we went our own ways, we both split our empire.
So it's safe to assume that you both started with the same number of assets before you guys got married.
That's right.
Maybe that's one of the reasons you guys didn't think a prenuptial agreement was important.
Okay. No, that's different, right? But when one person has so much more than the other, then I think a prenuptial should definitely be in place.
Wendy, what about yourself? Your prenuptial agreement?
Yeah, you could do that as well.
Sam, you...
So, but I would rather then it go to, if you're going to have a will, then, yeah, I understand that too. I think that could work. But I would want to make sure that everything that I've earned went to the right people, that it wasn't then later on fought over and went to places that I didn't want it to ever go to, right? Not that I'd know by then. But
somebody else's debt, you can marry into wealth, and if they lose everything, you can lose little that you have or be in a minus.
Yeah.
Sam, you're against prenuptial agreements. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and why you feel that that's not important to have a prenuptial?
Sure. Okay. So, sat sri akal sareਆਂ ਨੂੰ. My name is Sam. My name is Sam. I'm from Victoria, BC. And I just want to start by saying that I think prenups should definitely be handled on a case-to-case basis. Every couple's situation is different, and there is no right or wrong answer here. It's just a discussion that we need to have so that everyone can get what their beliefs and their side of the argument is out there for people to have the information to make an educated decision. That being said, I'm a 35-year-old married Sikh man. I've been married for 12 years. I did not sign a prenup. I did not ask my wife to sign a prenup. And I'm here to debate why they are not necessary. So if we're gonna really look at this, you got to start with what is I'm Punjabi, right? So what's a Punjabi wedding? You have your Anand Karaj. The Anand Karaj, if you go to Wikipedia right now and type in Anand Karaj, you will see that it says under its very first heading, important things. The very first thing on that list is a quote that says, "A marriage is a partnership of equals." Mm-hmm. And I believe that a prenuptial agreement is inherently contradictory to that. On one hand, you're saying that a marriage is a partnership of equals, and on the other, you're trying to put in a legal document that says we're not equals, that we are different. So the belief of what a marriage is supposed to be in our culture and what a prenup actually is, they just don't agree with each other. And then, it's also important not to forget that there can be distrust when somebody is presented with a prenup, because you're immediately going to think, oh, this person thinks I'm out to take all of their accumulated wealth and assets. And I would just say that it is important for anyone who is entering into one to make sure that they seek out their own legal representation, to make sure that it is not something that is been written in a way that is beneficial for one party and negative to another.
But Sam, like Harminder was saying, if you were obviously young when you got married, and
I was 23,
and your wealth or your assets were quite limited, and they're pretty much the same as your spouse. Now put yourself, say, 30 years after, and you have accumulated $1 million, and you want to get married to someone that only has 100,000. Would you not want to protect your assets, especially if there are children involved?
And this is the one instance in which I definitely believe that there is value to a prenuptial agreement, and that is when somebody is going into a second marriage. Whether it's just one party or both, at least one of them has gone through an unsuccessful marriage, and so they have experience to back that up. It's just not hearsay in other people's experience, it's their own lived experience. And if that person did have children from the first relationship, I believe that they should do everything they can to protect their interests of their children, because that should be your priority above any future spousal relationships you commit to.
Well, one would think that where's love then in the equation? So when you're getting married, doesn't it feel like, when you're younger, you're getting married and you're accumulating your wealth together. That's understandable. But then let's say you're older and you're getting married. You're entering into a prenuptial agreement. Now, doesn't there feel like something's been sacrificed there? Like, how do you grow together? Because like you said, marriage it's a union of being one, right? But now we're separating the finances, but yet we're still saying that we're one. So how would you respond to that?
Well, so
Blind.
Are you asking me or somebody else?
No, sorry. Yeah, carry on. Sam, carry on. You can respond, yeah. And Harminder will give you a chance as well.
Okay, so for that, a prenuptial agreement, it's a legal contract, and if the two parties are going to it committed, I don't see why they would not be able to, as reasonable adults, come to terms that are not necessarily like, oh, you're not entitled to anything. Like this is not it doesn't have to be like, I want to keep my money and not let you ever have any of it if this should fail. It can be set up in a way where you can still express a commitment and a love to a person for the second, third, or how many ever times it is, and still in that document accommodate and allow for securities to be put in place so that your children are taken care of, in the event of everything going wrong.
Harminder, you had something to say to that?
Well, for what I was saying, love is blind. I mean, nobody takes the Anand Karaj, nobody walks around the Maharaj debate with the intention of going back on that. Mm-hmm. But it happens a lot. It happens all the time. The divorce rate is higher than ever. And I think two people, if they really do trust each other, the trust should also be in the prenup, that this is for everybody's best interest.
Well, you're listening to Garam Chai with Karan and Paul. And how would you like to respond to that, Gurpreet?
So, I do agree with Harminder. Like, nowadays, the divorce rate is high. I think 1 in 3 people that you meet is divorced these days. So I do think that you've got a lot more to look into. But just going back to what Wendy said earlier on about back then when they were getting married, prenups never came up. Right. But then, see, I'm also wondering, after you said that, is that because back then, not that you're ancient or anything, right? But back then, not a lot of women were working. They weren't as strong. Women weren't as strong as they are today, right? So now you're almost meeting women that are more powerful or maybe are equal to man, right? So now I think that's where a lot of times now where prenups come into it, where before it wasn't ever really discussed. Does anybody agree with
Wendy
me?
I wonder if Wendy has a different take to this, because Wendy is married to an Indian man, and so you would naturally think that she was more empowered, because
Well, I was, and I still am empowered.
I love it.
It's great to hear another woman say that.
No, because my husband was an immigrant, so if it was a prenup, it would be me instigating a prenup, and that's not the way that I was brought up. That's not the way that society was at that time. Like I said, there may have been some around, but those would have been for the super, super rich or whatever. But you never heard about it. Now, we do have a family friend. Actually, it's from my husband's village. They live here in Canada. And he only told me today that this gentleman has a prenup with his wife. It's his second wife. His first one passed away. And they have a child together, but they're going through a divorce. And now, she came from India, but she also has 2 grown children from another marriage. So what I look at is if he has a prenup, it's to protect his assets, etc., from perhaps his stepchildren being able to have any sort of claim on his assets and things. But, did she fully understand, coming from another country, what a prenup was all about? Because, like I say, now they're going through a divorce, and maybe it wasn't the way it should be. Divorce, she should be benefiting from a divorce, I suppose, to some point. But how much is he not giving her, right? I just don't think that prenups are the way to go if you're sure of yourself. If both people are sure of themselves.
But it's not about being sure of yourself. You just don't know what's going to happen. That's the thing. It's just the future's unpredictable because nobody ever goes into it not being sure, right? So you're sure of yourself, but you don't know if the other person's going to be committed.
Well, that's true too. But that happens in anything. In any society, you don't need to have a prenup for your wedding. I mean, there's thousands of couples that don't. People get divorced. Hopefully they've got good lawyers that make everything an even split. I do know that when you, and I can't say, I mean, obviously Harminder and Gurpreet, you've been married, but my understanding is the day that you get married, and if you're getting a divorce, the court is going to look at how much you've contributed to the family, how much you've contributed to building the assets in that family, and that's where they'll make the settlement from. If your husband had lots of money beforehand, I'm assuming you don't really have a claim on that because you weren't part of the life that helped him build his wealth. And it goes vice versa for a woman to have a prenup for her man, for a husband, although you don't normally hear about those. It generally seems to be the male wanting to have a prenup. I haven't heard of any women wanting a prenup, but it would go both ways.
Sam, you have something to say?
Yeah, I would jump in. I was doing some research before I got on here today for this topic, and just to point to Gurpreet's comment earlier, the current divorce rate for first-time marriages in Canada is around 50%, not quite at 66 yet. It's a little bit lower than she said, but it is around that number for second marriages ending in divorce.
Yeah, that's right.
And then on the topic of women and asking for prenups,
Sam, even that number even increases third time around to 77%.
It does, yeah. I noticed that too. But on the topic of women and asking for prenups, you are definitely. I was only able to find a source that was a lifestyle magazine, so it's not like a census or anything. But there is definitely an increase in working age women, first time or not, wanting asking for the prenuptial agreements, and there's the reason that I would attribute to that is just that women are finally becoming more equal in the workplace, and they're actually able to accumulate something on their own without the support of a man. Granted, there's still a long way to go. They're not equal in the workplace by any means yet. But, the fact that women can now at a younger age sit there and say, I've accumulated this and I want to protect it, is another one of those situations in which I can see why they would feel that way. It's been because it has been for a very long time. Prenups have definitely been, the man side of the family has been the one asking the woman side of the family to sign it because they're trying to protect their interests, whether it's considering the other party or not at all. So to see now that that change in demographic of who's asking for them just makes sense with the fact that times are changing. But I still think there's an inherent trust issue that comes when you bring up that topic.
I agree. I was actually talking to a friend of mine, and she asked her son to sign a prenup. A very, very wealthy family, and he was getting married to a upper class girl, and it ended up actually destroying the relationship. The son ended up, when he did ask, he didn't want to ask, but because he was inheriting such a massive amount, so he understood his parents' views. Like, okay, you know what? Maybe I need to sign this agreement. And he didn't think it was going to be such a struggle. But when he went and talked to his girlfriend, it was actually a massive struggle to the point where she ended up walking away. So I do think that it can destroy a relationship. Well, you do hear people signing them. I mean, people do sign them. Because wouldn't it be, if you really think about it, if you sign that prenup, that wealth is still growing. If they have a business and that wealth is still growing, are you leaving yourself behind is the question? Are you signing your rights away?
Well, especially if you're staying home to look after the house and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, the husbands or the wives, depending who the money belonged to, it could be accumulating, and the other person has absolutely nothing.
I would say that in a situation like that, I think that the prenup is detrimental to that couple's relationship. Like, they cannot expect to succeed when that pressure is being put on from an outside source, especially. So I would say that if you're a parent who has accumulated wealth, there are alternative avenues that you can take in the form of legal documents to protect what your family has built without jeopardizing the relationship that your child is trying to participate in. A parent can write a living will that excludes that child and their spouse from any inheritance as long as they're together. That's a simple step, and then you don't have to put the pressure of the prenuptial agreement on this new. It's not even usually a new relationship anymore. People aren't just meeting each other and getting married. It's we're an educated society. We know what we want in life, and
you're listening to Garam Chai with Karan and Paul. Wendy, how would you like to respond to that?
It's pretty much on point, I think. Okay, now I'm tongue-tied. I can't answer. I've lost.
Harminder, go ahead. Seems like you want to say something. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'd like to respond to what Wendy had said earlier, that you can later deal with it through lawyers, but it can get very complicated and also very expensive if there's no agreement in place to begin with. One of the things being, one of the spouses may have had a great secure job going into the relationship. However, after the marriage, that person is unemployed for some reason and is sitting at home. And then there's a divorce, and then the other spouse has to support that spouse with alimony. So things like that come into place. So there is no clean cut. And to avoid that situation, I still think a prenup in place somewhat helps.
I think it's. Oh, sorry, Karen.
No,
I think
carry on.
If you're going to do a prenup, these are things that have to be discussed well before you maybe get even into a serious relationship. I mean, a lot of times in the old days, it was, you talk about marriage, or you talk about how many kids you want. Maybe these are discussions that should be there when you're dating. Like, what do you feel about these prenups and things? Do you think we should get one if we do end up getting married? That sort of thing. So it's more of a calm conversation, as opposed to maybe the woman going, "Oh, you don't love me because you want me to sign this type thing," because that's what it looks like.
But Wendy, when is the best time to actually have this conversation with your partner?
I think early on as possible, like Wendy said. Yeah. I think it should be one of the first things that should be asked.
But would you feel like you're really in love still? Like, okay, let's Gurpreet for you.
But this is before you fall in love.
Before you fall in love? Let's say you met someone.
I would be like,
so you go on
this is what I want.
So you go on your first date, and that's the first question you're going to ask him?
Yeah. It's going to be, what's your favorite cereal? What's your favorite color? And what do you think of prenups?
Yeah.
Right? Those are going to be on the list there. But I think, the young me, right, that didn't believe or didn't feel that I would ever get divorced, I would never have thought of a prenup, because I back then used to think that it was husband and wife and you create a life together and everything was shared and equal, right? Mm-hmm. But now that didn't happen for me, right? And I didn't walk away with anything, right? I don't know how other people's divorces work out, but in my situation, I didn't walk away with anything. So now not only had I left Scotland, my mum and dad and everything else that I've ever known and grew up with, right? Not just my things, but my businesses and everything. And I came out here to start my life over, right? And it didn't go that way. It didn't go the way that I thought it would. So now I'm on my own with a child in a country that I don't have anybody, right, but myself. So I had to rebuild my life and who I am and learn about who I am all over again, right? So I had to reinvent myself in a sense. So now when somebody comes into my life, of course I'm going to protect what I have because I've lost everything, right?
But are you going to take that risk? Like if your partner said to you, well, I don't want to sign a prenup, but you're madly in love with them and, you think that there's a trust, but you still feel that you need to. Like, would you sacrifice that relationship over a prenup?
Would I sacrifice... You know what? I wouldn't let it get that far. It would be something that I think I would discuss right off the bat, right? Like, I'm quite open about my situation. This is what I have. First things first, I have a child, right? So those things are already those are already serious topics, right? Serious discussions that you're going to have with whoever you meet. So that would be probably within the first hour or so, or the first meeting. You need to, those are already serious questions. So I think a prenup is okay to discuss at that point, because like I said, at one point I've lost everything. So I've had to reinvent myself, and I'm not going to let that happen to me again. So I will protect myself and my child and my future.
Sam, as you know, many people are getting married at a later age. So is it not reasonable to expect them to have retain their assets, which they build up prior to marriage?
Okay, so for this, I would say that definitely people are focusing more on their careers. You go high school, college, get the job, start the career, get a down payment on a house, whatever the process is. Should people want to protect their assets? I can't fault somebody for wanting to do that. I will never criticize somebody for wanting to do that. What I would say is, there, even though the later age prenups might be going.
We lost him.
What about you, Wendy? Do you have any comments on that?
Sorry?
The question is...
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, more and more people are getting married at a much later in life. So for them to want to protect their assets, why would one not want to sign a prenuptial agreement?
It still goes down to being it's a contract. I understand, because yes, if they both built up sizable assets and things, but should they? It's always gets back to the discussion. It's how open they are in their relationship to be able to have that discussion as to whether they feel a prenup will be beneficial for them, or not beneficial in that way, but protecting their assets or not. It's a conversation that they still have to have, and should they have it? Yeah. Should they protect their assets? I suppose so, but it all depends on their relationship, right?
Sam, we had lost you there for a few minutes. Are you ready? Can you hear me?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I didn't realize you'd lost the audio there. All I was trying to say on that question was that it makes sense that somebody would want to get a prenup if they have to protect themselves. But when we're discussing the relationship in our culture, an individual has to value the union of marriage over the individual themselves. And if you go the direction of getting a prenup signed, what you're essentially telling somebody or each other is that you value your individuality over what you could be as a couple. And if that's how you value yourself, that's fine. But I don't believe that you can achieve a loving, successful relationship.
So that sounds like a business contract almost, right?
Exactly. Like you're valuing what you have and what you have to offer, and not necessarily acknowledging that what you're trying to do is build something with another person.
Yeah, but what happened to trust then? Doesn't trust not come into the marriage? Is it not one of the elements of a successful marriage?
Well, if trust is an element of a successful marriage, a prenup basically says, I don't trust you. A prenup says, I am prepared for you to do something to screw this up, and I don't trust that you will see this through the way you're saying you are. So a prenup is antitrust.
Actually, that was a question for Harminder, sorry.
No, that was great, actually. Harminder, how would you like to respond to that? That was very well said, Sam. Very well said.
I think it just goes back to 50% divorce rate. Where is the trust? There's so much infidelity in marriages. There's just so much.
The 50% divorce rate is definitely there, but only 10% of people sign a prenup. So the value in the agreement itself is not very popular amongst most people. So the divorce does happen. I can't say that it's never going to happen, but the value in a prenup is not seen by the majority of people on this planet.
I think when it's a second time marriage, you've already either been burned the first time, there's been lost trust, there's so much has happened in your life when you've already gone through one divorce. And if you're doing this marriage second or third time, it makes it so much more important. Not only you're older, your parents are older, and then there's inheritance in place and at risk as well.
But
Absolutely.
But Harminder, if one of every two marriages get into divorce, and it's a question of wealth, why even get married then?
And that's happening. There's less and less marriages, but then also common law also is at risk as well, right? It's not just the marriage. When you're living together, you can go after each other as well. Marriages, relationships end nasty a lot of the time.
But then once again, when I talk about a business contract, like I'm just trying to establish, is it a business contract, or is it supposed to be based on trust, love? Like, do you think trust is out the window?
Let's go back when there was no prenups. It was still a business contract.
Right.
I mean, when there was arranged marriages, there was no love marriages, so the boy and the girl didn't know each other. But even our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they went to the families and checked out the family to see if they were on a level ground.
Okay.
And now that part has contributed to what's going on now. Right? Am I making any sense?
No, you are. But I think what's happening is, do you find it's an age?
It's always been somewhat of a business contract.
But isn't it predominantly individuals that are divorcees that are getting a prenuptial agreement opposed to those that are young? Because when you start off a marriage, you're pretty much on the same level when it comes to assets. And sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to speak to what you were just talking about. I was married when I was 23. My wife and I were both fresh out of college and university, right? Neither of us had any assets. Like, between the two of us, we owned one car, right? And so for us, that was the main reason. Like, we had talked about a prenup, but we love each other so much, right? And it was just, the conversation was had, and the prenup just didn't make sense to us, because when we even discussed it, we have nothing coming into this. So both of us are on that level playing field, and both of us have enough trust and faith in each other that if anything years down the road did go sideways, that we could, look at it objectively and not emotionally, and not try to go after each other in the way that you see these negative, drawn out divorce proceedings portrayed in the media. Because it does not have to be that way if the people involved in the situation are mature enough to put their ego, their pride, and their feelings aside and have a practical conversation.
That's the problem, though, Sam. When we are rational, we're able to talk about it. But then when you're actually going through a divorce, everybody becomes irrational because one wants to control the assets, one wants to control the children.
And I'm not divorced, right? So I can't speak to that. I've never gone through that, and I feel blessed for that. Yeah. So and that is why I would, when we started with the second marriage or third marriage, I would never tell someone not to do that, because they have a lived experience that I do not, and I cannot speak to that for them.
Right.
Wendy, if your son, was getting married for the first time and he's accumulated all his wealth and found a woman of his dreams who was madly in love with, doesn't have any assets, would you encourage him to get a prenuptial agreement?
No.
And
No.
you'd feel safe? You'd feel like, okay, my son is protected?
I mean, I'd like to say that, like, you people make their own mistakes and they learn from their own mistakes.
But that's a big mistake.
Right? It may be a big mistake, but they have to go into the relationship with their eyes wide open. If there's little hints that the potential spouse isn't going to be trustworthy enough, they should be able to pick that up. But if they make that mistake, then they make the mistake. You can't do anything about it. But as I think Sam said earlier, there's legal documents that you can draw up. So, if my son has, which would be nice if they had money, but if they had lots of money, they could draw up contracts. It doesn't have to be a prenup, but they could set something up, I'm sure, that maybe would give the person, give me satisfaction that it's a good marriage, but gives them, satisfaction, I guess. That's not quite the word I'm looking for.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Yeah, thank you. Peace of mind that they've gone in with their eyes open. They've taken their precautions, and that's it. If they fall, they fall. They'll get up again. So it's hard to say. You sort of look at most people. Your children, when they marry their spouses, that they're marrying good spouses. And all three of my kids are married, and I have no problem with any of their spouses.
And nobody signed a prenup?
And nobody has signed a prenup.
No, okay. What about, Harminder, I understand you have two children as well, and they're both married?
Yes, they are.
And did you have them sign prenups before that? No.
They're both into equally. They're young.
Okay, so basically you agree that when you're younger that...
and there's no accumulation of wealth.
There's no accumulation of wealth, or they're equal, then it's okay to go ahead without a prenup. But then it's... I think it's the later years. When the later years come along, you're seeing more and more people are wanting to secure their finances, their assets. But once again, I always question, when we are older and you're looking for your right partner, I would feel that, I don't know if it's a personal thing, but would something be missing when you're not fully in 100%? Because finance, okay, love is a big thing, but so are finances. So which is bigger is my question.
Well, especially at that age, when you're young, you have all this ample time to accumulate wealth. But as we get older, we have less time. So we have to be cautious and make sure that, we have safeguarded what we have earned, especially after all that hard work.
Earned, but however, I understand, I could be wrong, in BC that spouse cannot go after their spouse's partner's inheritance.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So,
but I want to talk. Gurpreet mentioned something earlier that because she's a single mom now, that if she went into a relationship, she would do a prenup, and I can understand that because, of course, they want to be able to protect their child, protect whatever they've built up, and she's fallen. They've got a divorce. She fell, and she's gotten back up, and this is how she's going to remedy it. But she'll still be honest with that person. She's not going to just say, "Oh, I want a prenup." She's going to explain to the potential spouse that this is why I want to have the prenup. This gives me a sense of security, and it takes care of a lot of things. And she did. If she got burned in the first round, she doesn't want that to happen again. So she will definitely go for that sort of thing. And I'm sure there's a lot of second-time marriages that they will think that, but I don't think it's a demand that the spouses will do. They'll explain their situation as to why they feel that they want to have a prenup. So I can't fault her for that. I wouldn't.
No,
if I divorced my husband, I
agree that every situation is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all agree that that it can't be a hardcore rule.
So are there more prenuptial agreements happening later in life opposed to someone that's just starting off?
I would think so. I think there's more requirement for it later on in life than there is earlier on in life. I was married the first time for 23 years, which was almost 40 years ago. There was no requirement then because, you're younger, you're 18 and 23, and now the kids are getting married a lot older or their second marriages, so it's different.
Well, not only that, like I know this individual, 22, he made his wealth in form of building and accumulating real estate, and they were about to get married. A couple of weeks before the actual date, he approaches a partner and asked her to sign a prenuptial agreement, which she absolutely disagreed, and she walked away. So I think wealth plays a major role when one decides whether or not a prenuptial agreement should be in place or not. Sam?
I think that would almost have to be the deciding factor because love is very important, right? That's what my entire relationship is based on, is love and trust. And you would have to the finances are what you fight about if you don't have something written out ahead of time, right? But it does, to me, the prenup does take away from what I believe a relationship should feel like. A relationship should be one of open lines of communication, trust, listening, understanding, and you shouldn't need a legal document to motivate you to do that. And I don't believe that this particular document would motivate you to necessarily behave in any way to actually make you fight for the relationship if you were on hard times. If you didn't have a prenup and you did accumulate wealth and you were afraid that a divorce would be drawn out and bitter in court, that is motivation to work through your problems and come to an understanding if you are willing to do it. And when you sign a prenup and you bring that into it ahead of time, to me that just says I don't have the time to invest in this, and that's an inherent problem with the document from the get-go.
Well, thank you, Sam. Great point you made. All our panelists did a wonderful job. Everybody brought up some really, really good points, and
they all did.
They did. It's been really good. It's been a great debate.
This was a wonderful debate.
But this is all we have. This is all the time we've got for today. You're listening to Garam Chai with Karan and Paul.
We'd like to thank our wonderful panelists and our producer, Raja Shergill. If it wasn't for him and for them, this debate would not have taken place.
Well, we hope this was educational for everyone, including our listeners. I've learned a lot from this show. I think it's, it makes me wonder, when I was younger, Paul, it's something I never even thought about, prenuptial, because at that time life was very simple. But now that I've gotten older, I'm in a different position in my life. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm questioning, is prenuptial something I would want to sign? Would I want my children to do this? I mean...
Yes, Ken, this debate on prenuptial agreement was quite educational. What I've personally taken away is that more and people, especially after they've been involved in a marriage and accumulated wealth and have children, are favoring and deciding to have prenuptial agreements.
Well, we would love to hear from you about this debate and topics that you would like us to debate on Garam Chai with Karan and Paul. please feel free to email us at garamchaikp@outlook.com. That's garamchaikp@outlook.com.
Until our next debate,
Please remain safe, healthy, and have a wonderful week.